Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine. Now, if you caught last week's episode, you'll know we kicked off a run of 4 weeks of going shopping. What I did was I headed out armed with 500 Rand and I looked to find an inexpensive or entry-level white wine and then a white wine at the top end of the price point, and then I looked to do the same with red as well, but I only had 500 Rand to spend, so a little bit of juggling, and it was great fun because I don't spend nearly enough time buying wine in supermarkets. I tend to get it from estates or from visiting winemakers, so this was a fun way to see what's actually out there and what is accessible to most people. And this week we look at Pick and Pay, and the 4 wines I've got are started with a wine from Zalze. Now, Zalze I know particularly well. It's got one of the nicest golf courses in the country. The finishing stretch is magnificent. There's a par 5 17th that is quite delightful and has vines just to the left of it for added effect. It also has one of the finest restaurants in South Africa. I've been going there for a long time now and it never disappoints. There's a little boutique hotel as well. And then there is the wine. Now, the wine has become a really big part of what Zalze does. They export wine all over the world, 20 countries I think they're now sending their wine to, and they're making some really good stuff, getting some 5-star platter recognition and getting some acknowledgement from the industry as a whole. We haven't gone for the top end though. With this wine, it is their Cellar Selection Sauvignon Blanc. It is a 65 Rand bottle of wine, and this is my entry-level white for Pick and Pay. Now, Klein Zalze's got some great wine pedigree, in particular with Sauvignon Blanc. Their top-end Sauvignon is a past platter 5-star winner, and so this should suggest that they know what they're doing when it comes to Sauvignon Blanc. This, not quite at the top end, it is a 65 Rand bottle, although it's got a nice big zesty bouquet on it, and it does come from good breeding. Just a little sharp, but it does have some nice grapefruit notes. I don't particularly like grapefruit, but if you do, this is a Sauvignon Blanc for you. It's got that kind of feel to it, that sort of rich but slightly piquant citrus to it. Does sit nicely on the mouth. A nice full wine, good Sauvignon Blanc, not quite as light as we're sometimes used to, but I think that works out quite nicely. Nice one for some food, and a nice one at 65 Rand a bottle. So, from entry level to decidedly not. This was the second most expensive bottle of wine in this whole process across the 4 weeks of going to Checkers, to Pick and Pay, to Spar and to Woolworths. This is the Hermanuspietersfontein No. 5 Sauvignon Blanc. They've changed the name now. It's now called the Cat with the Wooden Leg or something to that effect. They've added a little bit of wood to it. So this is going back a little. And 2012, it's an older Sauvignon Blanc. Now, you don't find older Sauvignon Blanc, certainly not in supermarkets. So discovering this in Pick and Pay was a really, really pleasant surprise. It's a wine that comes from a great part of the world. Walker Bay makes some superb Sauvignon Blanc. Hermanuspietersfontein in particular. This No. 5 is a wine that's got a lot of accolades. And to find one that's 5 years old, well, 198 Rand or thereabouts might have been the price, but it was one I was very happy to pay. As you can see here, there's a slightly richer colour to this. It's gone into that more golden hue, which is the sign of a Sauvignon Blanc that's aged a little. And even though the glass isn't too close to me, I can already pick up on the nose. There's a really fragrant nose coming off that. Oh, it's an aged Sauvignon Blanc, one of my favourite types of wine, especially if it's well made. And Hermanuspietersfontein does have a pretty good track record in that regard. Oh, that's great. You probably wouldn't pick it as a Sauvignon Blanc first up because it's just got that little bit older. It's got that depth to it, just a little bit more substance. Crying out for a nice meal to go with it, but absolutely lovely on its own as well. A richness, a texture to it. That's really, really good. And that's a terrific find. Expensive, yes, but world class. So on to the reds. Pretty good start with the Pick and Pay white. Kicking off the red, again, the entry level, and here I've gone for something from Durbanville Hills. And Durbanville Hills is a very, very well established name. Hasn't been going for as long as people might think, but it's having a huge impact around the world. A lot of Durbanville Hills being exported falls under the umbrella of the distilled giant, but what they're doing here at Durbanville Hills is really good. They've also got some more bespoke wine coming out of what's a really, really big cellar. This, their Merlot, I'm guessing should be just a nice pleasant wine. As I did last week, I've gone for a Merlot and I hope that it'll be just a little softer and a little more subdued for a wine that is both young and not terribly expensive. But Durbanville Hills, again, good record of producing some very strong wine. They've got a good team in place there, and I think this should do the trick. Now, as well as the wine, there's a very nice restaurant, but there's also an exceptional view. I had the pleasure of hosting a conference at Durbanville Hills last year, and I hadn't been there for a while, and I'd forgotten just how lovely it is to stand on the deck at sunset and watch that view down across the Durbanville Hills and out to the ocean. You can see Robben Island, you can see Table Mountain. It's a terrific deck. So for somewhere, if you're in Cape Town, it's only 25 minutes really from the centre of Cape Town. And as well as the great wine, it's a super place to go and just hang out, have something to eat and take in the majesty of the Cape. So last week I went for a Merlot in this category. I have again, and not a dissimilar response. Last week's Merlot was a little sharp. This one also has a touch of sharpness to it, but it is smoother, and it's a pleasant enough wine. At 70 Rand a bottle, your expectations aren't too high, in which case they're met fairly comfortably. It's going to drink nicely and probably do with another year or two, can probably do with sitting and just getting a bit of air as well, but it's just a nice South African Merlot from a lovely estate, and at 70 Rand a bottle, absolutely no cause for complaint. And then a wine I'm almost reluctant to share with you because I feel like there's a small group of us who know this and we want to keep it a secret because it is exceptional. I've had this time and again when I've found it on wine lists, and that's not very often. It is the Tamboerskloof Syrah. Now, if you're thinking that this wine is sitting in the heart of downtown Cape Town, and no, not that Tamboerskloof, it's out near Stellenbosch, and it's a wine that's not made in great numbers, but it's a terrific example of that soft, supple, satiny, Rhone-style Syrah that is just absolutely glorious. They've got it just right time and again, and when I spotted this on the shelves at Pick n Pay, absolutely no question as to which wine I was buying. Normally when we film Dan Really Likes Wine, we do it all in one take for authenticity and to ensure that everything comes across genuinely. In this case, I'm hoping to do this in about 12 takes because then I can keep on tasting one of my very favourite wines. Klein Zalze is a very small estate. It's across the road from Waterford, if you know your Stellenbosch winelands areas. Gunther, the winemaker, is probably best known for his surfing, but he's not bad at making wine either. In fact, it flows in the family veins. He's one of 5 brothers amongst his other brothers. One of them is the winemaker at Hartenberg, another is the winemaker at Thelema. So he comes from a family that certainly knows how to make wine, and this is ample proof. It's just a luxurious wine. It's got a softness, it's got a suppleness, but without being bland, without being boring. There's still some character to it. There's plenty of flavour. There's a nice rich ripeness to it. It just sits so beautifully. It's kind of that Pinot Noir finish on top of that Syrah body, if that makes sense. It's a really nice wine, and it's a consistently nice wine. I've had it time and again, and every time it gets 2 thumbs up. It's just a really, really nice example of that soft, supple Syrah. And that is why I have to apologise, because I set myself a budget of 500 Rand. And I spent 503 Rand and 50 cents. Now I saved 160 Rand last week, but that's not the point. I've gone slightly over budget, but for the wine I've had, I think 503 Rand 50 is not a bad spend. This here is 170 Rand. Go out, if you find it, buy it. Buy as much as you can. It's an excellent wine. It's one I can drink continually, whether it's on its own or whether it's with food. And across the rest of them, a pleasant enough Sauvignon Blanc from Klein Zalze, a beautiful aged Sauvignon Blanc from Hermanuspietersfontein, and then that Merlot from Durbanville Hills, Again, nothing exceptional, but a very pleasant wine and one that'll sit midweek for a nice glass very easily indeed. So that's your selection. That's 503 Rand 50 from Pick n Pay. Next week we head to Spa, and there I found something surprisingly good. Find out what that is next week on Dan Really Likes Wine. Cheers.